I'm your host, Slim bin Mohammed Rafi, and here is my YouTube channel, Zamir Universal. I'm going to talk to you today about the nature's revenge. There are 9.5 million Gaza people scrambled and concentrated in a the highly concentrated population in a small piece of strip, Gaza Strip, where there are about 2.9, and the others are in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Now, when we talk about the revenge of nation, and the whole world has been doing her best to get a wild beast, a wild animal, just a monster, not a human being, a monster, a real monster, in the shape wearing, a wolf but wearing a sheepskin called Natenyahu. This evil person has blood on his hands of millions of people. Been there for the fourth term. He has really kept his hold over the dirty, filthy, and the bloodthirsty Jews. And in those years, the people he has followed in their footsteps is the one who have brainwashed their children, and from there, that I think the people, the brainwashed kids, they got the IDF. The young from between 18 years old to 21, everyone must serve in this Zionist state or apartheid state or a state, and for that I am going to show you a documentary. It's an excellent documentary, and I hope the one who people made this documentary will not fight with me on the copyrights, because I am not getting any monetary benefit from them. It is for there, and I acknowledge here that there's some parts of that I have rearranged so that I could make you to know that how this whole thing manners, how this scum of the society was gathered, and who was the complicit. The main culprit in this was the Great Britain, and I think all the problems left by this British Empire, like Kashmir, like Rohingya, like Hong Kong, like Syria, like Libya, wherever you go and you find that the disputed territory is the one which was left in haste by the Great British when they were horribly defeated and kicked out, and now they are all, I think, cornered in one small tiny island, over 50 million people, and most of their people have died, and they can't even now have basic toilet services to themselves, and for that they had to get the immigration first from Kenya and Africa, and then from, I think, all the Commonwealth countries, including India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and then obviously when there have been crises in the world, the Vietnamese, then these South Americans, from the Chile, and then when the I think USSR invaded, then there are people from Hungary, people from Austria. So it's a mixture of people there. There is hardly few percentage of British left, and this is why for the last, I think, second or third time you have Mayor of London who is a Pakistani but born in Britain and duly elected there. And now when you look at both the Labour and the Conservative parties, you find many member of House of Lords, and also you have many people in both the parties, and they are part of the cabinet and part of their assembly, and this is what I think has happened to that. But after destroying the world peace and leaving these problems, and then with the money and complicit and the intrigue of the United States of America, this illegitimate child was born, and this was created right in the heart of the Islamic world to hurt the Islamic hold, billions of Muslims all around the world, and especially the Arabs, which were rich in oil, and the eyes of both Britain and the whole of Europe were on the energy. And that time, and it was the only crude oil which was the source of energy for everything, and they had not their own gas or oil, and they depended heavily on that. So they bound their hands behind their back, calling a petrodollar, that you cannot buy this thing. So this green note, which they could print as much as they wanted, had no gold cover or any other commodity cover. And then the United States became what you call as a American empire. And the end of the American empire, what they did it by funding, by supplying all the bombs, the latest jets like F-35, F-16, 18, and what they did is that they, one by one, they took the land of the poor Palestinian. And on this planet Earth, if any population has such and had a collective punishment, is the Palestinians, and they continue to do that even in Gaza today. The genocide watched, observed by the whole world with a dead conscience is still going on. So the documentary opens your eyes, and funnily enough, $220 billion have been paid to this illegitimate state through ammunition, jets, and even the salaries of the soldiers, and they have the much higher standard of living than an average American. Now the wrath of God has already struck them, and that fire which they cannot. There are 10 million, almost equal number of people they have hurt in Palestine, is the God Almighty has taken in their golden state of California, the Los Angeles, the county. I'm putting that for you as well, that last night they warned that 10 million people must leave the Los Angeles County, and they cannot return back because of the poisonous, all the things which have been burnt out, and they are up in the water and the air and the pollution, and no trees, nothing left behind. So you see the misery, and you see with all that power and arrogance.
Young and old, they are going now to a land which accepts them. They will march to their work in the Jewish settlements, to build roads, to quarry stones. They will drill wells to restore to Palestine's soil its long neglected fruitfulness.
Zionism, the nationalist movement that emerged in Europe in the late 1800s, was dedicated to the idea that the Jewish people, after centuries of living as persecuted minorities within other countries, were entitled to a state in historic Palestine, the biblical homeland of the Jews more than 3,000 years before. But there was a basic problem with the choice from the start. Palestine was already home to hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs who had been living in Palestine for centuries, first under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, and since World War I under the control of the British Empire, and for decades had aspirations of their own for an independent state in Palestine. Tensions steadily escalated during the 1930s, placing more and more pressure on the British colonial government to reconcile the competing interests of both sides. After World War II and the Holocaust, the situation reached a breakpoint. Ultimately, the British colonial government made the decision to withdraw and to pass the problem on to the newly created United Nations. Arab leaders as unfair, but in the spring of 1948, Zionist leaders declared Israel a state along the proposed borders anyway, triggering the first Arab Israel took possession of even more land. By the time armistice was declared in 1949, Israel controlled 78% of historic Palestine.
He generated, and I think rightly so, for what Jewish people as a whole have dealt with in Western societies and globally because of anti-Semitism. The question then becomes, what is the proper response to that? The Zionist answer is, of course, statehood, and there's many people who would sympathize with that if it was in fact done in a vacuum, and if it was in fact done for a people without a land in a land without people. The reality is that's just not the way that it happened. There were people here. They lost their homes, their livelihood, their nation, their everything.
This was a land in 1910 that was 93% Palestinian Arab and 6-7% Jewish. How did it suddenly become 80% Jewish and 20% Palestinian? This was not a normal demographic transition. This was a consequence of Israel's desire to create a Jewish state, and to do that it had to get rid of as many Palestinians as possible. There's other more complex factors, but that's cutting it to its bare bones as we see it.
That is, I think, in a certain sense, the core of the conflict. The Palestinians have suffered inordinately as a result of the creation of Israel. The creation of a Jewish state in a country that had an Arab majority necessarily and inevitably caused them irreparable harm.
The Palestinians used the term catastrophe to speak of the 1948 consequences when they lost their land the first time around. In 1967, it was another Nakba, another catastrophe.
In June of 1967, Israel won what was perceived as a stunning underdog victory over much larger Arab armies during the Six-Day War. With victory, in addition to taking land from Egypt and Syria, Israel began to militarily occupy all remaining Palestinian territory in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. The United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 242. Citing international law forbidding the takeover of territory by war, 242 explicitly called for Israel to withdraw its armed forces.
Level, the government that is ruling over these people is not a government in which these people, the Palestinians, have a voice.
There's really no way to fully understand why the Palestinian people have resisted Israel for so long without understanding this basic history of dispossession and occupation. But for the most part, this isn't the story we get in American media coverage. Instead, the legitimate grievances of Palestinians, including their right to resist an illegal military occupation, get pushed out of the frame by this constant discussion about extremism and terrorism and anti-Semitism.
Nationalist movement, as it is a religious movement. And in fact, it often assigns priority to its national.
यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें, उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार जरूर